You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Making Tracks. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
That's not true. That's impossible.
You're listening to Making Tracks. I'm your co-host Mark Newbold, and joining me today is a man who, if he was the star of Marvel's new movie Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, it will be renamed Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Onion Rings. Mark, how you doing?
I hate onion rings.
You can't have everything.
Do you know what? I really don't like onion rings.
I've just had a bag of onion rings. It was just on my head. It was just in my mind. I think I went and saw Legend of the Ten Rings. I actually stopped and bought a bag of onion rings, and it's just there. It is.
Nice. Well,
there it is.
No spoilers. I'm seeing it tomorrow. So, but is it good?
Oh man, we knew it would be good because Marvel films are generally good.
Yeah.
This was really good, especially as an origin story. It was like it was sort of Doctor Strange, Ant-Man, the first Iron Man sort of level of great origin story. If you don't message me and say, wow, that you weren't kidding, that was really excellent, I'll be very surprised.
How you doing, dude? How's things?
I'm good. Very good, very good. I'm assuming it's the same for you?
Yeah, I trooped yesterday with the 501st UK Garrison in my Boba Fett. We were at launch for Cine Valley, which is a film and media training centre that is going to basically be supported by Reading University. So it's really cool. And it's really great for the industry because obviously we've got such an amazing array of films that are being produced and made over here now, both for cinema and for streaming and obviously for domestic TV and stuff. It's great that somebody's actually coming along and actually going to start to invest in the future as well, which means that hopefully there'll be some awesome talent that will be homegrown and will be able to make new Star Wars films as time goes on.
Loads to talk about today, but before we do that, we'll do what we always do. Have you had any new stuff come into your collection this week?
Yes, it's not a bad place to be, but I've literally had so much stuff in this month because of my birthday and all that. I don't actually have anywhere to sit because I got some new vintage collection Star Wars figures the other day, but it's for Clone Wars ones with the new Ahsoka and what have you. So a couple of things worthy of really discussing. I was able to pick up in the wild, which is very rare for me, for 40th Empire Strikes Back Bounty Hunters double pack of 4-LOM and Zuckuss. I actually found this, and there's actually still quite a few there floating around. I walked into the normal kind of high street, walked into Game, and for 33 quid, got this double pack, which is kind of quite nice. So
now that makes sense because I went to Echo Base with Carl Desert Planet Discs Bayless, and we went into the local Game because he said that, there's some cool stuff, there's usually some cool stuff, and they did. They had, it's the black with the silver icing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. They've kind of harkened back to the original kind of releases, so they've put 4-LOM and Zuckuss around the wrong way and stuff. So
or the right way.
But it's 4-LOM, not 4-LOM, which I know you're quite sensitive about. So, yeah. But other than that, two things came in all the way from Japan. I actually had the press preview for Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith arrive as well. Can't read it because it's all in Japanese. But apart from that, it looks pretty nice. So, yeah, quite happy with those. How about yourself? What have you had?
Well, it is so weird that you mentioned those coming through because I ordered from a collector friend on Facebook the Japanese press photos from the press kit for Phantom Menace.
Nice.
So
cool.
I've got those coming this week, which is that is weird. But other than that, not a huge amount. Latest Insiders come through issue 204. But other than that, not a lot, thankfully, because my floorboards are creaking and I could do without the weight going in the room. So let's pile into the other conversational pieces that we're going to talk about today. First thing, even though you're 40, you are too young, I would imagine, to remember ABBA because they split up the year after you were born. I remember ABBA very well because they were the big band when I was a kid, or one of the big bands when I was a kid. ABBA have reunited after 40 years. There's a new album coming out in November called ABBA Voyage. They're doing a virtual tour, and this is where it gets interesting for Star Wars fans because ILM have worked with ABBA to work up and do the visuals for this tour that's been put into, I think it's a 3,000-seat stadium near the Olympic Park in Stratford. It all looks amazing. It starts next year. What did you make of this? I didn't realise ILM were even involved until I think a Rolling Stone or Variety tweet came online. I was like, what?
It's a bit of a surprise, but I suppose at the end of the day, ILM is a VFX house, so they go where the commissions are, and possibly also the publicity and the challenge as well.
True.
So
yeah,
you are right. ABBA, not really my bag, but they look cool. They look younger, so
yes,
maybe some de-aging tech, and looks like they've been mocapping and stuff like that. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how all that pans out, but also see what the knock-on effect. Could this be something that other acts pick up and use, or is this something that we can kind of maybe see employed in other avenues, be it, I don't know, computer games or just on the net or actually in films? So yeah, exciting.
I think in the live event arena, there's talk of there's going to be like a Ronnie James Dio sort of hologram that's going to be going out until that they're working on. They've done it in the past with other acts. I think they did it, or they've certainly done it with Elvis, and there's talk of other...
They did it with Tupac, didn't they? Like a hologram.
Tupac,
and
yes.
also Richard Burton. They did a holographic Richard Burton for one of the many kind of iterations of like the live touring versions of War of the Worlds by Jeff Wayne. So that kind of stuff has happened before. That's slightly different because that's like those performers aren't actually around. This is kind of taking it slightly differently, and I guess building on maybe de-aging technology. And it'd be interesting to find out if they've done what they did for Mandalorian Season 2 for the finale episode and kind of like merge a little bit of deep fake with de-aging and everything else to kind of like make an idealized version of ABBA.
They released 2 new tracks. One of the tracks was just the lyrics written up on the screen. The other one was an actual video, clips of them from days past, obviously back to the 70s and even when they were kids. And right through to the end of the video is this new sort of concert footage sort of look. And I can only imagine how good it'll look when you're watching them as if they're on stage. And apparently they're going out with this technology and they'll be backed by a live band. It's not like going to the cinema. It's a interactive sort of thing. But also the thought of ILM doing this, going into sort of the live events realm, it's a new venture for ILM, and I thought it was quite exciting.
You could do the Star Wars music in concert kind of thing, and potentially, in fact, there you go, there's a way that we could maybe see, let's say, Carrie Fisher and Princess Leia back on the screen. Lots of possibilities.
Loads of possibilities. And on the same day that I posted on Fantha Tracks an article about ABBA, an article about referring to WWE, Mercedes Varnado, Sasha Banks, posted all these things to Fantha on the same day. The news landed day before the new Iron Maiden album, Senjutsu, came out, which, by the way, is absolutely awesome. If you've not heard it, get it. It's brilliant. Bruce Dickinson was interviewed and said, if you ever go to a Maiden gig, you'll notice Eddie, the mascot, Eddie the Head, will come out and basically fight all the band, but mostly with Bruce. Bruce will be giving him a hard time and they'll be sparring and fighting. Usually Bruce will get his foil out because Bruce was I think he was ranked number 7 in the UK back in the 80s.
Yeah, that's right.
Nearly went to the Olympics when Seventh Son came out. Excellent fencer. Will have a little fight with Eddie and mentions, and it's something we've talked about on the show in the past when we spoke to the guys from Silver Sabres, the lightsabers are tough enough that they can actually spar with them. And Dickinson mentions that fighting with lightsabers and how he would love to fight Eddie on stage with a lightsaber. I'm like, this is a dream article for me.
Exactly.
2 of my favourite things, Star Wars and Iron Maiden. It's the dream. What did you think of that? Who's not going to want to see that?
Well, exactly. I was starting to think, well, would they be playing Flash of a Blade off of Power Slave, or would they be playing the Duelists off of Peace of Mind? But yeah, that would be interesting. And also because obviously Eddie is kind of like, he's normally, a good 7-8 feet maybe, because he's like wandering around on stilts and stuff. That would make for a really interesting fight. But yeah, as you said, Bruce is wicked with a foil, as almost as good as he is in the cockpit of a 737. But this is the thing, the whole LED tech that is used in lightsaber combat, been around for quite a few years, and there's now a really healthy lightsaber combat sport industry, really. As you said, you've already mentioned like Silver Sabres and stuff, and there's other ones. There's like a lightsaber kind of version of, like, I think it's Ludo or Judo or something. I can't remember what it's called now, which is slightly different to what Silver Sabres kind of teach. To be honest, that's what they used on the latest Star Wars trilogy. Daisy and Adam Driver, Matt, they had lightsaber hilt with LEDs in the blades, because then it already emits the colour, and so it does a lot of the heavy lifting that normally you'd have to get done in VFX and that, because it's all captured in camera. So the sparks and the clashes and that are added on but, you know, the normal kind of glow of a blade and stuff and how that interacts with like the ground environment, and the actor is captured in camera, so it makes it a lot more authentic. So yeah, I think it'd be fantastic. So hopefully when they when made the next kind of like Play of the O2 or something, we might get some lightsaber action.
Fantatrax.
As an actor who has been in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, he was in Back to the Future 2, Deep Impact, any number of other great projects and films, Elijah Wood is a very recognisable face. And he has been in the Star Wars Galaxy before. He was voice of Jace Rucklin in Star Wars Resistance, but you never saw his face. But he has made it clear that he loves the big franchises, and he's been in Star Wars, and he would love to be in live-action Star Wars. Also would love to be in Marvel. He was in Sin City back in the day, which was, of course, Dark Horse Project. But his heart lies with Star Wars. So that is kind of the crux of the conversation. But my question to you, Mark, is above Elijah Wood being a big name, and it'd be great to see him because he's a cool guy and he's enthusiastic. What do you think about when really well-known faces turn up in franchises? With Star Wars, we've always had, like with the sequel trilogy, Daisy and John, not mega names. Oscar Isaac was very well known, but not a household name by any measure. Most of the actors that turned up in the sequel trilogy weren't huge names, and that went right through to the other preceding trilogies. Do you think it would pull you out of the moment if, let's say, Tom Cruise turns up and you just go, oh my God, it's Maverick from Top Gun? Would that pull you out of it, or doesn't it matter because it's Star Wars?
Oh, I think it matters massively, hugely. I mean, I can remember the concern that I think a lot of people had when Samuel L. Jackson was cast as Mace Windu in the prequel trilogy. I think there's a lot of people who are like, hang a sec, how's that going to work? You know, I think partly because of the roles he had played with Quentin Tarantino. I mean, obviously, I suppose we can go back to the original trilogy and you can say, well, look, you know, you had Alec Guinness. In some respects, you kind of do need that. You need that one grounding, almost veteran actor who can kind of like, I guess, like Alec used to say, kind of brought a sense of kind of like legitimacy to the film. Interestingly, the two actors from the sequel trilogy that pulled me out of it for a little bit was Adrian Edmondson in Last Jedi, just because he's Eddie Hitler to me. I was probably 14, 15 at the time, so bottom, it's just me all over. And I still haven't really grown beyond that since. And
you haven't?
No, and Rise of Skywalker, actually, it was Richard E. Grant. And I think that's not necessarily because of him being relatively famous, which he is pretty damn famous, but I've worked on a series with Richard E. Grant in the past, so that was just like, I can't separate the two personalities from one another. If we go back to Elijah Wood, he's kind of Frodo. And so it's a little, I suppose it's a little bit like, you know, if Mark Hamill was in Star Trek. And this is the curse and the risk. Daniel Radcliffe was like, I want to be, can I be like Kylo Ren's next apprentice? To be like, piss off, you're Harry Potter, you can't be that. It hugely depends, I think, upon the role and the actor, because there are some actors, and as you mentioned Tom Cruise, whenever I see Tom Cruise in any action film, I just feel like it's just Tom Cruise in an action film. I never really believe that he actually is that character. I just feel now that he's almost like a caricature of himself a little bit. But then that doesn't necessarily work for every single actor. It would have to come down to the role, wouldn't it, really? I mean, yeah. I think possibly it might take a little bit of time to get used to, let's say, Elijah Wood if he was like one of the lead characters in let's say, Rogue Squadron, for instance. If there's a massive departure from Frodo, so maybe he was like a bad guy or something, then maybe, you know, that's probably the way to do it. So you're not playing to expectations.
I don't know. I mean, there's no delineation between TV and film now, and there shouldn't be.
No, exactly.
If it was TV and it was a series, you'd be seeing this character week on week. I think you'd probably get past it quicker.
Yeah.
If it was a movie, then you might you're only living with it for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. It might be more difficult. But again, it's Star Wars, so there's every chance that a character, or an actor rather, like Elijah Wood or any well-known actor could turn up. They could be behind a mask. They could be essaying a CG character, a bit like Alan Tudyk as K2SO. Not that he was a household name, but he's one of those guys that you see him in anything and go, where do I know him from? I've seen him in loads of things. He's one of those guys. He's like the modern Bruce Campbell. Like Bruce Campbell was in all sorts of stuff back in the 90s. Go, where do I know him from? I think if you pitch him in the right place, I don't think it will be too intrusive. You mentioned Daniel Radcliffe, and they remind me of each other to a large degree.
Very much, yeah.
You know, and there's something about those kind of guys that you think, oh, I'd love to see more of them. I'd like to see them in bigger roles. And, you know, Radcliffe's a great example. He's going to live with that Harry Potter thing around his neck till the day he dies, and I'm sure he's perfectly proud of it. But for him, I really want him to have something else, like, really big. That it's like, well, I didn't just do Harry Potter. You know, I also did that thing in Star Wars that made $2 billion. And I kind of want the same for Elijah Wood. Him coming up as one of those names Yeah, I could get behind it, but it's got to be in the right role, hasn't it?
Yeah. At the same time that he was in Lord of the Rings, Ian McKellen was also in Marvel, like in X-Men.
In X-Men, yeah.
You could put the two next to each other, and because of, like, I guess the hair and the kind of eyebrows and stuff, like, you know, he didn't look like Magneto. The nose was the same. Apart from that, two different characters. So, and no point did I kind of go, that's Magneto in, you know, Lord of the Rings, or that's Gandalf in the X-Men. It's,
Very true. Very
you know, and that comes down to, I think, the competency and the ability of the actor as well.
It does, and that's such a good example. And I suppose if you sort of expand the thought process a little bit more, when you're watching Raiders of the Lost Ark, you're not thinking of your Han Solo, are you?
No.
And
That's the obvious.
You know,
yeah,
and when,
exactly.
Yeah, you know, and when you're watching Empire Strikes Back, you're not thinking of Indy or Jedi, which came after. You're not thinking of Indy. So, but Harrison Ford is such, like Connery. You know, you think Connery, Kane, Ford. You know, that Tom Cruise, such a big personality, such a big movie star. Clint Eastwood. There's not that many of them that you think of the guy. But you watch Raiders or you watch Empire or Jedi or whatever. You're not thinking of Indy. You're not thinking of Han. I think if they get him in the right role, then I think it might just work.
Hi, this is Gareth Edwards, director of the best standalone Star Wars film since Caravan of Courage, called Rogue One. You're listening to Panther Tracks. Enjoy.
So earlier on this week, I had the good fortune to catch up with Mark Van Olen. Mark is somebody that many of our listeners will remember working for Topps and Star Wars Authentics. He now works for Rubies on their Genuo Novo line. It's the high-end costuming and helmets, clothing line that's taken over essentially from a Novos. We talked all about that. Days future, days past, what's coming, as much as we could. So here's the first part of my chat with Mark Van Olen from Rubies. So we're joined on today's episode of Making Tracks by Mark Van Olen. Mark works for Rubies, but he's going to tell us all about his job position and what he does and everything else, how many sugars he has in his tea. Mark, welcome back to the show.
Mark, it's so good to see you and hear you. It's been way too long.
It has.
You know, it seems like ages ago since pre-quarantine that we were able to connect.
I know, the world's been flipped upside down and shook a dozen times, I think, since we last spoke. But things are new. You're not where you were before. You're in a different place. You're now working for Rubies, but you've announced this amazing new range. Lay it out for me, Mark. You will explain it far better than I ever could. So explain why people should be excited about this new venture.
Yeah, this is a really exciting time for Star Wars collectors. It's funny, I feel like I can't escape Star Wars myself. You know, I was at Topps for 6 years. I worked on the trading cards and then Star Wars Authentics with the autographing and the photos. And now I'm in that same space running a direct-to-consumer website with high-end collectibles for Star Wars. So the leap was pretty seamless. I'm at Rubies, the costume company, which is now part of what we've started calling the NECA-verse. So the owner of our company is Joel Weinshanker. He owns NECA, founded NECA, and then they own Loot Crate and Kid Robot and a few other companies, including Rubies. We formed a new company, and this is the exciting news, Genuo Novo, which is a subsidiary of NECA and Rubies, bringing together experience in costumes and collectibles. And we took on the Star Wars license for that space. So officially licensed, high-end costumes and collectibles. So that is the new license that we have for our new company. And as part of that, we are fulfilling what was the back order on the prior licensee, Anovos. So if you have an outstanding back order from Anovos, we are actively working on that now.
Okay, I did want to touch on that because when that press release came out on the 18th, it was very clear you were laying out what Rubies was all about, Rubies 2, you know, the NECA Association, obviously, all of that stuff. But you were very clear to mention the Anovos issue. I'm saying, I'm doing air quotes, not very good on the podcast, but obviously for collectors who'd laid down money for that in advance and so on and so forth, why is it incumbent upon you as a licensee to pick up their responsibility in that sense? Is it something that you as a company decided you wanted to do? Was there a requirement to do it? How did that work?
Yeah, I think I'm actually not privy to all the behind-the-scenes discussions, but I know that with this license, we want to be in the space for a long time, and we know that there's a very hungry, excited group of collectors and consumers who are built a really exciting range of product over the past several years, and now they're just waiting for delivery on some of these. So we're actually making those exact items, and I think one of the big questions coming out of it was that if I ordered a helmet from Anovos, how will the Genuo Novo one be different? and I can tell you that it won't be. The nice thing is it will have the same mold, paint job, I guess structure, even the only thing that would be different is like the sew-in label now says De Nuo Novo instead of Anovos, but we're giving them the exact item they ordered, and then we're adding that to our portfolio of saleable items. So if you visit our website now, there are 6 items for sale, 4 helmets and 2 hats. All of those 6 items came from the Anovos back order, and they're able to be manufactured pretty quickly. It's why they're the first ones out of the gate, and they're using the exact same structures, paint jobs, manufacturing facilities as the Anovos versions.
That's really good to hear because, as I say, I've got friends. I mean, my co-host Mark is the head of the Rebel Legion here in the UK, so obviously the costuming side of things is very prevalent in his mind, and it was something that had come up in conversation. So you're honouring those items that were previously laid out by Anovos. Moving forward, you're clearly ready to go, ready to roll on all kinds of new stuff. Obviously, without giving anything away because you can't. Can we anticipate items and products from across the depth of the Star Wars timeline?
Yeah, that's the intention. I will say our number one, like I keep saying, we're laser focused. Our number one goal is all of the items that are on the Anovos back order because it is across 50 different SKUs. It is already a big range of items, and that range actually cuts across classic trilogy, some prequel items, and some new trilogy items. So there's actually like a decent range to begin with. It is a lot of helmets, and there are some costumes as well. And we're actively working on just about all of them at the moment, trying to figure out what are the timelines for manufacturing and then ultimately delivery to the consumers. That's our starting point. We're not working on anything truly new that you've never seen before until at least next year, because right now we already have 30 items in the hopper that are currently like hands are on trying to figure out like how fast we can get them.
That's an interesting point. And then, so obviously you say there's nothing that we haven't seen, but in terms of what you do in relation to, because we're in an era of Star Wars now where there's so much stuff on the way, I could list, we both could a dozen projects and a dozen live action or animated shows that are coming. How far in advance do you get a look at these things? Because obviously you want to be as on point as you want to be. You're kind of in the same boat, I would imagine, as companies like Sideshow, like Hot Toys. You know, they need to see it and get it sculpted and get it ready. You guys are the same. So what sort of lead time would you be looking at?
Yeah, I think like any licensee, we're privy to the slate of content that's coming out, and we always have like a little bit of lead time versus consumers. I think with everything shifting, and especially in 2020, a lot of things bumped to 21. That's true on Marvel. It's true on basically every property. I would say we're well aware of what's coming, but with, like, there's nothing from like Visions, in our pipeline, if that's the kind of granular level question you're asking. Honestly, like anything coming from the new content, we haven't started looking at yet, only because the back order is just so gigantic. And people have been waiting. I mean, some people have orders from 2016 that need to be fulfilled. And we're actually not going to be able to fulfill every single back order in this calendar year. Like, our plan takes us through 2022, and we're letting consumers know that. Like, we're not being shy about like what the timeline for implementation is, where we have timelines. Like, there are some items that we already have estimates that we can get out early in 22, and others just quote in 22, which could mean middle or end of the year, and then there are others we don't have timelines on at all. So we're working on all of that. We haven't even gotten to like, could we do an Ahsoka lightsaber from the live action show? You know what I mean? Gotcha. Like, we're not there yet. We will eventually be, because we do see this to be a long-term license and something that Ruby's really wanted and NECA really wanted as an incremental space to their existing contracts. It just makes sense to be in this space. But we have not started on that type of development. And in fact, that's a great call to action for the customers that are out there. What do you want us to work on from the new streams of content coming once we get through the back order?
That's fantastic. So you, in terms of relationship with customers, honouring what was laid out before, I'm sure a lot of people thought, oh, well, that's X amount of money sunk, and it's not. Does that give you as a company then, as a new venture, essentially, a really solid platform to to jump off from.
Yeah, I really hope so. I mean, our number one goal right now is winning over the trust of those consumers. And I know a lot of them have been waiting for a long time, but they actually really liked the Anovo's products, the ones that they received, and they're just now waiting for the ones that they've paid for a while. I will tell you, development times are long. Something I'm learning already as we were going through the back order, I was like, well, we can't just run up production on something. There is a very long lead time in terms of figuring out where we can manufacturing it, creating the sample, getting it approved, making sure it's as close to like screen accurate as possible, because that was really their whole point of point of differentiation, and the way in which they sold it to consumers as well. They're like, that Kylo Ren costume looks like the one Adam Driver wore. It's not the one that Ruby's makes as like a $20, disposable Halloween costume that just sort of, gives you the impression of Kylo Ren. We're doing as close to possible from the movie. And so with that, it's a different level of product scrutiny, as well as finding the right labor to make such an item. And so those timelines are very long. So it's not surprising. It was surprising to me at first hearing like, it's going to take us like 18 months to get into production on this particular helmet. And then you see everything that goes into that. And it's like, okay, I understand now why pre-orders were like a year out, right?
So for you personally, coming from the world of Topps and Authentics, the immediacy of print in that you can turn things around quickly, you can get them out there very fast, similar sort of licensing in which you see things ahead of the game, you've just kind of said it, it must have been a real whoa shock when you think with Topps you can turn things around so quickly. With this, the level of detail, the level of quality and everything else is multiple. It's such a different game. Was that a bit of a culture shock for you?
Only a little bit, because, trading cards make it seem like we can print them tomorrow, and you can with like Topps Now, and even Upper Deck has an e-pack thing that comes out like the next day. But our actual card product did usually take almost a year to complete, start to finish. Once you get all of the approvals and go to print and then ship out to customers, it was usually like 10 to 12 months for a collection to be launched. So I'm kind of used to that normal product development timeline. This is just a little bit even more extended, just given, again, like the level of scrutiny. But I will say that the consumer base for this, I think, doesn't expire the way that like something would on an item that you would otherwise describe as like in the moment or hot. Sure. Like sometimes a property needs to be like super relevant in the pop culture for you to sell like the $10 action figure, but like the $700 helmet is still relevant to that consumer base, whether it arrives tomorrow or a year from now, for the most part. So there's less of, I think, like a staleness factor on particular things in this type of space, in like the high-end collector space. Whereas in retail, like I wouldn't be launching a Kylo Ren item right now in retail, sure. But like we're working on Kylo Ren items for this collector set.
I'm Anthony Daniels, and you are listening to Fantha Tracks. Well done.
So in terms of communicating to the fans, two questions really, two-part question. One, what consumer base are you aiming at with this? What kind of people are you going for? And secondly, you seem very keen, and always were at Topps, to interact with fandom, to know and find out what people would like. Again, you've said it earlier on, you want to know what people would like to see. How would you intend to filter in that information without being swamped with, I want a Dengar in Empire version, I want a Dengar in Jedi, but you know what I mean? It's how deep do you want to go?
Yeah, so there are two things. First off, we want to hear from all the prior Anovo's customers to let us know, one, what your updated shipping address is. I did not anticipate how hard it was going to be to actually get shipping addresses from people who are owed product. That is actually taking a lot of time in the customer service inbox. And part of it is that our website is not set up with the functionality yet that we've created accounts for people. Right. And we do need to do that. So that's something on us, that we need to get to a website that has the functionality that will let you build a profile, have your shipping address, and you can see all of your orders. But with the Anovo's back orders, we're handling all of that manually and offline and in like Excel files. So we're literally going into the customer service inbox and emailing those customers saying, you're owed this Mandalorian helmet. What's your correct delivery address so we can send it? And we're doing that very manually. And then I'm literally replying to them with their tracking number when it goes out. All of that should be automated in the future. It is not at the moment because it is the back order, and it is like we've been live for like a couple weeks now. So those builds are coming. In the future, I would also assume we'll have we're telling you to email the customer service at denewOnovo.com email address for everything. We will have a separate email for just like product suggestions, and we can go in and start like ranking and quantifying the requests that we get for particular characters. I'm sure like everyone wants like a full Mandalorian costume and a Boba Fett helmet. Anovo's used to have their interest list where you could just, they present sort of a concept and you let them know if you want it or not. Like, we're going to work on those. It's just all of those are going to be builds in 2022, because right now it's all about reputation repair and getting up what I've been calling Operation Helmets in Hands, like getting those helmets into the hands of the consumers who have been waiting. And we started shipping this week on our first 6 items. So there are customers right now who are probably getting deliveries today, tomorrow, Friday, and into next week on the Imperial Royal Guard, the Flame Trooper, the Shore Trooper, the Mandalorian, and then the 2 Imperial officer hats that are all up on the website. And that's really the top priority at the moment.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark BanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
So, Mark, are you sitting comfortably because we've got a listener's question?
No, I'm stood up still.
Okay, of course you can't sit down in your room because you've got too much Star Wars stuff, you poor man.
I know.
It is from Jonathan Wilkins, former editor of Star Wars Insider magazine, still works for Titan and Star Wars on all their big, lovely, big, thick magazine book-style format thingamabobs. And he has a question for us, which is very, very much welcome. And the question is, do or do not, there is no try. Great line, but surely only the Sith deal in absolutes. Discuss, ... So, Mark, what do you make of that? Obi-Wan says it in Revenge of the Sith, only Sith deal in absolutes.
Yeah.
By saying the word only, he's kind of making an absolute statement himself, and he's a Jedi. So it's a bit of a paradox, but let's see if we can spin this off into some sort of useful answer for our listenership. What do you make of that? Do you think there's any validity to that question?
I hate paradoxes, if I'm honest. And
yeah.
And I hate...
Can you figure out why?
No. No, of course not. Good question, as you would expect from the editor of like Star Wars Insider magazine. Fascinating. I mean, that's one of those ones where like you kind of go, is Obi-Wan saying that intentionally to try and kind of get some kind of reaction out of Anakin or something? He does make a good point, but also then it's like the whole thing of like the bad guys are always the ones who tend to speak the truth. You just never believe them. It's pretty hard to not sometimes speak in an absolute, isn't it? Really, when you think about it. Otherwise, and you kind of need definitive answers. I think maybe one of the downfall to the Jedi is because maybe they wanted to be so open and a little bit vague and stuff, and they didn't necessarily speak in absolutes. And maybe if they were spoken absolutes, they may not have been tricked so easily by Darth Sidious.
Yeah. The Jedi have all their teachings and their lessons, but it is a bit more zen. It is a bit more interpretive, whereas the Sith are the rule of 2, for example. It's pretty unequivocal what that is all about, and it's something they've adhered to for a long, long time. And I think with the Sith, it is it's more black and white. There's the instruction, go and carry it out sort of thing. Whereas with the Jedi, it's, like you can imagine Qui-Gon laying down an absolute rule. That's kind of not his style.
No.
He wants you, and even in the High Republic books like Loden Greatstorm is a kind of a Qui-Gon character to me. He wants Bell to sort of think it through a little bit and figure it out for himself. And Qui-Gon was a little bit like that with Anakin. That was always my sense of, not Anakin, with Ben rather, what he saw of it. And with Anakin, he starts to give him the instruction and, don't worry, you'll get there. It's a little bit more, you need to figure this out for yourself. Whereas with the Sith, Palpatine's not going to sit there, put his arm around Darth Vader, Anakin's shoulder and go, right, I want you to subjugate this planet, but you figure out how you want to subjugate this planet. You've got to learn. This is how Sith learn. You be you, and come back when you've got the job done. That's not how he's going to do it. He's going to give him instruction, and it filters down. And I think what you said at the start is very true. Ben is trying, I think anyway, to get a rise out of Anakin. He's getting under his skin because he knows how to get under his skin. Even down to the end of the conflict, the high ground moment, all of it is just to unbalance Anakin, because I think Ben knows that he's definitely the underdog at this point.
Totally.
And Anakin is, and Anakin's fueled by rage. The environment they're fighting in kind of more suits Anakin more than it suits Ben. He's on the back foot all the time, but he's the negotiator, isn't he? He's good with his mouth. He's good wordsmith, and so he's getting under Anakin's skin. So saying all these little digs, I mean, even to the point of when they're on the platform, Padme's down. Padme is Anakin's responsibility. It's his wife. Ben's protecting her. He knows this is going to kick off. Padme knew that Ben was basically going to kill him. I've got to kill him. I've got to stop him.
Yeah.
We're beyond that. So he knows that conflict is coming. It's got to happen. So he's almost drawing Anakin into the fight because it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I think there's an element of what Anakin says is, only Sith deal in absolutes. The quote there, do or do not, there is no try. That's a Yoda line from Empire Strikes Back.
That's a bit of an absolute, isn't it, really, when you think about it?
It kind of is. There is no try. You either do it or you don't. It's kind of counterintuitive to the way the Jedi sort of lay things out. Don't you think?
I mean, it's interesting because, I think that's one part that, the High Republic is kind of getting, really right. It's starting to kind of show, at least 200 years before where we see the Jedi Council in Phantom Menace, it was a little bit more open. It seems like attachment is still frowned upon, but it's not necessarily forbidden. And it kind of seems like, at least in some of the subtext, that, some of these Jedi, they either have crushes or they just, give in to their temptations and Elzar Mann does. It's quite interesting because you kind of think that actually, that kind of problem that the Jedi run into is solely because they're too introspective sometimes. And I think maybe they just need to listen less to themselves and listen more to the Force, which is kind of ironic, really. There's definitely something in the High Republic where by the end of the High Republic, we're going to see how it probably fits really quite nicely into where the Jedi are by Phantom Menace, which is quite an exciting prospect. Just on a complete aside and possibly a bit of a rabbit hole, but one area whereby we had it explored in Legends with Darth Bane novels, it's always been mentioned in canon, but yet we still haven't yet got a canon version of what that rule of Sith, how that came to be. So that again would be something to see, maybe why they did go down that route, and also potentially again the contrast between the Sith and the Jedi, because I think maybe if you were to go back far enough, the difference between the Sith and the Jedi would be very little.
I think also you had the Jedi versus Sith war, which is mentioned in canon, that they clashed, and a lot of the major conflicts that were in what we now consider Legends, to what I can see, are being sort of stuck to and then will be expanded upon in canon in time. But the Jedi becoming the generals of the Republic's army in the Clone Wars feels like that really was their undoing. Like you say, in High Republic, there's Tian Toon who's like, the Republic needs an army. And the Jedi are like, yeah, but we're kind of your army. You don't need an army. They do need an army because the Jedi might not always be there. And Tier 2, and I know this is going to move on to later stories down the line, but we know he's right.
Yeah.
The Jedi won't always be there. With the rule of 2, it means that the Sith are essentially commanders. They're the generals looking down on the chessboard, aren't they? They're commanding. Whereas the Jedi, because there's thousands, I think they said there was like 10,000 Jedi left at the time of Attack of the Clones, probably could fit the entirety of the Jedi inside the Millennium Falcon by the end of Revenge of the Sith. Even with them all spreading around the galaxy going to ground, there's not that many left. The rest have been wiped out. So with the Jedi being part of the fight, as opposed to the Sith directing people where to fight, it makes the Jedi kind of more like the Sith in that sense.
Exactly.
You're never going to have a rule of 2 for the Jedi because the Jedi are the boots on the ground guys that go out and keep peace around the galaxy. The Sith are never going to go be boots on the ground and keep peace, or specifically, if there's 1,000 Sith, go out and take the galaxy, because they tried that in the past and it clearly didn't work. So to see how the rule of 2 comes about in canon could be really, really interesting. And it does go back to Jonathan's question. It's like, yeah, the Sith do deal in absolutes as from a Jedi's point of view. If you ask Palpatine that question, if you're sitting in the Coruscant Opera House listening to Anakin and Sheev have their conversation, Palpatine's going to sort of twist the words of everything that's been said. Oh, yeah, well, yeah, Jedi would say that from their point of view.
Hi, this is Steve Grad from Pawn Stars. I approve and I authenticate Fantha tracks.
Of those new items that are coming, then which one excites you the most? Of course, you're going to say all of them, but is there one that ticks your particular interest?
Well, right now, of the 6 that we have on the website, the Mando helmet is just gorgeous. It really is. And even the Imperial Royal Guard, because that red paint is just spectacular. I love the Imperial Royal Guard. It's ginormous. It's the biggest helmet we have, I think, other than Vader. But it is just actually it's definitely taller than Vader's, but like the Vader helmet is also just massive, right? The Imperial Royal Guard is gorgeous. The Mandalorian is a real statement piece. And then I'm excited about the range of X-Wings that are coming. Because, you know, with the Novos and now Denuo Novo in the Star Wars space, there were fiberglass helmets and there were ABS plastic helmets. And there's like a good price difference between the two. Like the fiberglass is much more expensive. The ABS is a little bit less expensive, still high end, but not quite as expensive. Yeah. The X-Wing helmets are all really nice looking and significantly cheaper than the fiberglass. But the replication of the design that's on there that's specific to maybe a particular pilot you love. Like, I think General Merrick's helmet is super cool. Yes. And if you liked Rogue One and you want to be General Merrick with his amazing mustache and everything, like, you're good to go with the helmet. Like, you just get the, you know, you get the helmet, you got the mustache, you're golden. By the way, we are working on that. That all five of, well, I think it's 4 X-Wings are coming. There's a Luke Skywalker. He was Red 5. Yeah. Red Leader. Oh, Gold Leader.
Brilliant.
Angus McGinnis.
Brilliant.
So they are on the way, hopefully toward the end of the year, if not early 2022.
Quick question. You mentioned the actors associated with the characters. Would there ever be the potential in the future to do signature editions?
I think I am the face of Star Wars autographs still. Is that true? I've gotten this question from a lot of people. And by the way, I would love to do that. It is not in our contract currently. Right. I think it would be a great build. I love working with the actors. My fondest memories working at Topps were all related to autographing. You know, planning Celebration 2019 was a career high for me and also a personal high. Like, I just love all those actors, like, across the board. There's not one bad thing you could say about any of them. Delightful behind the scenes and with the fans. So I think that would be an interesting opportunity. Nothing to announce on that front yet. Or at all. I shouldn't say yet. That makes it seem like it's coming, but nothing to announce on that front. But I have heard that recommendation from a lot of people.
You just mentioned Celebration. Would it be presumptuous to assume that Celebration next year might see some more Denuo Novo announcements?
Well, I will tell you this. As a licensee, we will be invited, and I assume we will attend. More than that, I couldn't tell you. By the end of this year, we're going to have about 20 items on the website for sale. And going into then the first half of 2022, there'll probably be another 10 or so. I have to look at the exact number, but when you meet me in person in May of 2022, I'm assuming if we go, I'll be the person there along with a team. I hope that we will have gotten to over 20 to 30 of the items that are on the Star Wars back order, and that people will be coming up to us saying they're happy with the product and that they received their product, and it'll then be more forward-facing versus backwards-looking, right? So we'll be more focused on what could come with new product as opposed to like cleaning up what like the liabilities are on the customers that are owed product, right? I think that's going to be an inflection point around that.
Hey man, it's me, Kevin Smith, Star Wars fan, Fantha Tracks fan.
One other thing that occurs to me, you mentioned that not only do you have the Star Wars license, you have other licenses, and obviously our listenership is not just Star Wars fans. There's fans of many other things. What other licenses do you have at the moment?
Well, for Denuo Novo, I actually want to be very clear that the only license we have is Star Wars. So at Ruby's, we have lots of licenses for costumes, and that goes across like WB and DC, Viacom, which includes like SpongeBob and Blue's Clues and a whole bunch of toddler brands that I work on. I work on the Sega portfolio, which has like Sonic the Hedgehog. It's quite an array of Halloween costumes. If you go to rubies.com, you can see our catalog, and it is gigantic. And we also do a ton of unlicensed items. So if you just want to go as like a pirate or a doctor or something, we've got all of that covered as well. It's a huge, huge business, and we have a global footprint, and we have a UK office and offices in Europe and in Asia. We're kind of everywhere. On the Denuo Novo front, this is our first license with Star Wars, and I think it's a great first one because we already have like a runway of product that we're going to chase and a built-in consumer group that we're going to make things right by. And Lucasfilm was a fantastic partner. I've been a Star Wars licensee essentially slightly interrupted, but straight through for 7 years. So they're great to work with. And I think we can make good on this and then expand out Denuo Novo into other spaces, into other licenses.
That's wonderful. We used to speak a lot when you were at Topps, and as you say, the world got turned upside down for a few months, but now we're back on track. So we will speak again very soon. It seems like there's plenty of news coming from De Nuevo Novo and from Rubies as well. So we must make sure we make this a regular thing.
Absolutely. I miss talking to you. I was telling that to other people too in the fandom that during my sojourn is what I've started referring to it as. I couldn't actually talk about Star Wars because it was like too close into work. Like you're not supposed to talk about work when you're on furlough. And so I was like, I'm going to watch everything on TV that isn't Star Wars. I became a Scooby-Doo aficionado. I watched every episode of every iteration of that show. And it was great, by the way. Highly recommend, especially Mystery Inc. That's my favorite iteration. But like, I'm thrilled to be like back in the fandom and talking to people about the content because there is amazing Star Wars content rolling right now. I thought Bad Batch was great. I'm very excited about Visions. Also, like just all the stuff happening with Marvel is tremendous. I'm going to see Shang-Chi tomorrow night. And then, we're off to the races. There's just so much great stuff happening next year with Obi-Wan and Boba Fett and Mando Season 3. It's going to be great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, as always. And we will definitely catch up again soon.
Yes, I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. So, as you heard, that was a fantastic chat with Mark. He's a wonderful fella. He will be on the show again because De Nuevo Novo and Rubies as a broader company, they're just getting started with Star Wars. There's loads coming out. Question for you, Mark. Mr. Von Olen there says that he wants to hear from fans and from fan groups what kind of products they would like to see in the future. And he said, that we're looking across the breadth and depth of the Star Wars timeline. So stuff that's not come out yet, what would you like to see?
I mean, interesting because obviously the stuff with the Novos, some of it was almost out of the box clearable with for costume groups, the Rebel Legion or the 501st, and other stuff needed like modifications. And one, there's some stuff that if they've got access as a licensee to the archives, I would love to start to see like a collection of costumes or costume components that we haven't been able to really get the resources for. So I mean, there's like a vest that the Endor troopers, some of them wear. There's not any clear kind of like photographic references for that. So if some of it's a bit of a guesswork. So if they can go into the archive and get photos and be able to kind of recreate that is something I'll be highly interested in. But also, I think one thing that I miss about collecting at the moment is the studio kind of scale and also like the master replica blasters and stuff like that. So kind of like the one-to-one scale, highly detailed, not for use in, cosplays and costuming, but actually just for displays. I think there's a bit of a gap in the market there as well, I think.
The way Mark was talking and the way he sort of laid out what De Nuevo Novo and NECA and Rubies obviously want to do, they do want to kind of go into that granular stuff, and get there with stuff that's not come out before. There's things that they'd like to do that they've not done before, but they certainly want to hear from knowledgeable people like yourself, from the costuming groups and the broader fandom, stuff that's going to sell. So I think it's an exciting project and it's an exciting era for that sort of heavy scale, high end sort of product. It's a good time.
And I think also actually it's a really interesting kind of situation because Rubies is a name that has been associated with Star Wars collecting and the Star Wars license for for years and years and years. And obviously a huge shame that what happened at Novos happened at Novos. And but at the end of the day, if you're not able to service for the fandom and get the actual product out to market, it is time to move the licensee on to somebody who has the ability and the production levels to be able to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing Mark said, just as you just heard, that they're in this for the long haul. In the short term, it's get those Novos back orders sorted, get those products out. Like you said, the only difference you'll see is stitched inside it will say De Nuevo Novo instead of saying a Novos. That's really the only difference in quality. They're going for high-end quality stuff. But yeah, they're in this one for the long haul.
That is all we've got time for. So a big thanks to Mark Von Olen for coming on and speaking to other Mark. It's like 3 Marks in one show.
Marks, I know.
I'm sure there's a sitcom in there somewhere. And also a big thank you to the great Jonathan Wilkins for sending that rather Twicky?
That's Buck Rogers, mate.
Yeah.
This is the Star Wars podcast. Get it right.
Rather tricky question earlier on. And of course, if you want to send us a question, we really do appreciate it because we do try and get around to answering every single question one way or another. So if you do want to send in a question, comment or theory, can you tell them how you can get in touch?
If you want to be a part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit panthertracks.com or check out the free Panther Tracks app through the App Store to follow us on your mobile device. That's one of the best ones you've done. You can reach out to us and send in all listeners' questions by emailing radio@panthertracks.com. You can also leave a voice message on the form that's on the website. If you want to leave us a voicemail, we'll read it. Comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds at Panther Tracks, and be sure to subscribe. Leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to James Semple for composing the Panther Tracks intro, Adam O'Brien for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. Remember, tune into our weekly Panther Tracks news show, Good Morning Tatooine, live Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. UK, 4 p.m. Eastern, and 1 p.m. Pacific on Facebook and YouTube. And that's me done for this episode.
Great. Well, thank you for that, buddy. You are done, so I'm pretty much done as well. I will see you, or at least speak to you, that is, for next week's episode, which is going to be 106. So you look after yourself. Of course, everybody else, thank you very much for listening. Stay safe, take care, wear a mask, get vaccinated if you haven't already, and as always, may the Force be with you.
Coming up next on Panther Tracks Radio, it's Desert Planet Discs.